and welcome to Chow and Tell. My name is Reina, and today I want to tell you a story about talking to strangers. A few weeks ago, I was out in Boston buying tickets for a stand-up comedian, one of my favorites. Eddie Izzard was in town, which was great. And so it's a weekday afternoon. I'm downtown, lucky, and I managed to get these tickets. And it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and Chinatown isn't too far away, so I decide finally to go get some food at one of the places I've always wanted to go eat at. It's called the Gourmet Dumpling House, and there's always a line outside. We've passed it a bunch of times, and it's just impossible to get in. But I figured on a weekday afternoon, there's probably not going to be too many people. So I go to the Gourmet Dumpling House, and sure enough, there's no line. And I walk in, I'm by myself, and there's space, but not a whole lot. It's still a popular place. So my server decides to seat me next to two people who are also just in the middle of their meal. It was one of the few tables available, so I get sat next to a gentleman and this other young woman who were having dumplings. And I turned to them and said, hello, do you mind, I'm just sharing your space. And I said, do you have a recommendation of what's good? I've never been here before. And the gentleman turns to me and says, well, do you eat seafood? And I said, yes, I do. So he does something really, really unusual. He takes his chopsticks, picks up one of his dumplings and says, here, try one. Now, this is a perfect stranger, mind you, and most moms tell you don't talk to strangers, but I never listened to my mom. And so I turned to him and said, yeah, thank you, sure. And I tried the dumpling. It was delicious. And that got us chatting, and we ended up having a fantastic, magical conversation that still has continued to this day. And with that, I want you to please welcome my strange, lovely, eccentric guest, Tonyji. Welcome to the studio, Tonyji.
Well, thank you. Hi.
Do you remember those? Do you remember the dumplings?
Oh, how could I forget? That was my mother told me never talk to strangers, but you seem to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we found a lot of things in common. I mean, talking to strangers was one of them. And I think, what else was it? Oh, we got talking, and you immediately said, are you from India?
I said, what part of India?
What part of India
yes.
you're from? It was
Right.
really perceptive.
Yeah.
And I don't know what gave it away.
Well, there were some possibilities, but I finally settled on Indian and not Hispanic or Italian or
you have
Armenian or something.
You have some experience, oddly enough, with India, although you're originally from Brooklyn?
Yes.
So Tony's from Brooklyn, an Italian neighborhood in
Yes,
Brooklyn.
that's right.
But he goes by Tonyji, just so you know. And tell us why that is.
Well, I just go by Tonyji on Yahoo, not in public or in person.
Well, now you're public.
Yes. So, but it's not such a bad name. I kind of like it. So maybe I'll switch to Tonyji.
And what is you have some sort of old fascination with India and Indian culture, and
Well, yes. When I first encountered India, I was in the Merchant Marine, and I had been to all of these many exotic places in Asia. But when I went to what was then called Bombay, I was flabbergasted. I was undone. What a place! And I fell immediately in love, and I've not fallen out of love with India. It's just, probably, as Mark Twain said, it's the greatest show on earth, and it really is.
That's probably true. I mean, that's a great way to describe it.
Yeah, well, it just is. And I've been going there since the 60s.
Wow.
And I'm still fascinated. It's like being in love with an exotic woman. I just don't think it ever ends,
And you've written a book, too?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, well, so good, kind of you to mention. Yeah, I wrote a book on the Mughal Empire, the people who built the Taj Mahal. And this was the period just before the building of the Taj Mahal.
My dad needs to be listening to this. I think you're going to love this book, Dad. So
Well, the main character I thought would be Noor Jehan, who was the empress who basically ran the show because Jahangir, her husband, kind of abdicated in favor of alcohol and opium, and so she took the reins of the government and did a splendid job of it.
wow. So it's like a feminist tale
Well, it
of
could
the
be,
Mughal
yes,
empress
yes,
in a way.
yeah, basically
Wow.
yes. But
I
she
wanna
was
read
one of
this.
the extraordinary women in history.
Fantastic.
Probably the most extraordinary. I mean, there are many things about her. She was a dead shot. She wrote poetry. She rode elephants.
Wow. She was a Renaissance woman. Of
She
course.
absolutely, yes.
That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
that's the best way to put it.
But you've done so many exciting things. I mean, every time I speak to you, you have another fantastic story, and I'm just always fascinated to hear you. And I think one of the things when we first met and were sharing the dumplings, I ended up ordering the same dumplings as you. I think
That's right.
just because we were having such a great conversation. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
and then you looked at my scar. I
Oh,
have
right.
this little scar from when I was a kid on my left eyebrow, and then you said,
I have the same scar, but it's grown over, and I wanted to show you a photograph someday. I will, and you'll see how pronounced it was.
I mean, I
Now
can
it's
still
just-
see a little bit
just
of it.
very little bit.
Yeah.
But it was pretty much like yours. And when
That's
I saw that, I
amazing.
said, yeah, and it's on this left side as mine is as well. So
Lots of other coincidences too. I think we lived a block from each other in Manhattan, probably not at the same time, but within a block of each other in Manhattan, which we
I
discovered.
thought it was the same block.
Within, I mean, maybe it was the same block, but like on one side and the other. It was close enough. I mean, Manhattan's, it's
Yeah.
small, but not that small.
Uh-huh.
And what was the other thing?
The
The
Chinese,
Chinese
yes,
place in Manhattan,
Yeah,
in
that's right.
Chinatown.
that's right. The food vendor who basically only catered to Chinese. I don't remember any non-Chinese, and you're the first person who I've encountered that knows the place and loves the place. It's just a wagon on the street.
It's this little card on the
Yeah.
side, on a corner, a street corner in Chinatown.
That's right.
And he says, there was this guy in Chinatown who had this street card, and he sold flat noodles for $1 and the turnip cakes,
The turnip cakes,
with
yeah.
that sauce. And I said, with that sauce, the sweet, savory
Oh,
sauce.
That's got to be the best sauce ever.
And you are still the only person I have ever met.
Yeah. And so there were so many other coincidences.
There was
too.
many
Yeah,
coincidences. We had a great time.
I did. I had a wonderful
And we
time.
talked a lot about food, and then I think it was a few days later, I'm here in Central Square, and
Oh.
suddenly I see you again. It's like we've had this weird parallel
It's
coexistence,
very, very funny.
and we keep popping up oddly in each other's lives in this strange way. I mean, Tony, the Italian Brooklyn, you've traveled the world, and didn't you mention something about Bob Dylan's motorcycle?
Oh boy!
wanna know
I'm really
about
sorry you
that.
brought that up, but yeah, I actually was. I was Albert Grossman's gardener, and he was Dylan's manager.
Wow.
And when Dylan had the accident, I went out to pick up the bike, which had fallen down a ravine, and me and a guy named Eddie Heath picked it up, put it in the van, and to make a long story short, the next year, Dylan said, "How would you like a motorcycle?" And I said, "Fine." And and I said, "How much would that be?" And he said, "Well, about a quarter, about 25 cents." I said, "Well, I think I can manage that." But
You bought Bob Dylan's motorcycle from Bob Dylan for a quarter.
No, actually, I was cheated. He demanded in the end. He demanded $1,
$1.
which was, of course, what the state requires, that you can't, I guess,
Oh.
sell something less than
Less than $1.
So
That's an amazing story. Well,
Yeah.
you're full of good stories, and you're also full of good food. A couple weeks ago, we went over to Tonyji's house, and he cooked us a fantastic meal, and I was introduced to Seitan Marsala. Tell me about that.
well, it's basically a takeoff on veal scallopini. It's seitan that's been immersed, it's been marinated in marsala and other things. And it's really delicious. It's actually more delicious, I think, than veal scallopini because the seitan is porous and it absorbs the marsala, which gives it a wonderful flavor.
I mean, it was very tasty. And for maybe some of our viewers who are not as familiar with seitan, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with, how did you find out back in the day or whenever you started?
Oh, well, it's kind of a staple of the Japanese and Chinese diets. Chinese call it something different. But what it is basically the gluten from wheat, from flour, from wheat flour, in this case, whole wheat flour. And there's a certain way of preparing this. It's kind of laborious. But you can buy it already prepared.
So is it a bit like a block of tofu comes in a, it's prepared and you can slice it?
Yeah, you can do that.
But it seems like it's firmer than that. And
it is firmer.
We don't have any raw to show you, but we have we'll show you the prepared stuff in a bit.
It resembles a natural sponge. A
sponge.
Yeah,
okay.
But a natural sponge.
Yeah.
So that's got those valleys and peaks and just the overall design of a natural sponge.
Which is great for absorbing marinades and
it's
flavors.
Perfect. Yes.
That's wonderful. And so do you eat meat?
No, I don't eat meat. I do eat fish, so I guess you'd call me a pescatarian rather than a vegetarian.
I saw a lot of Ganesha drawings and pictures and posters and stuff all over your house, and you have this kind of connection. It seems more so than many modern day Indians like myself.
Well, I do. He's known as the remover of obstacles, and there've been plenty of obstacles in my life, and I always hope for some obstacle removal, and he's been pretty good so far.
We have Ganesha, obstacle removal service. It's kind of a truck going down.
Yeah, that would be terrific.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. Well, should we? I want to show folks this dish that you've prepared. Tony has very kindly made some of that Seitan Marsala for us today, and I wanted to show it to all of you. So let me see if I can go to this. Light isn't always great here.
Does not look good.
But it's here. Let me fish out a piece of seitan and show you the seitan. So it's kind of got a meaty. It even looks kind of meaty,
like meat, yeah.
And you've got mushrooms in here as well. There's some mushrooms, and then there's like a brownish gravy to it. So that's really interesting because it basically does kind of what meat does, in that it absorbs the flavors. It's got a nice chewy texture that last I remembered, a nice mouthfeel to it, and
it has protein. It's proteinaceous.
So you could, it's a meat substitute.
I would say so. Yeah.
In fact, let's just show folks we have the container here of the seitan, and that's upside down, so you won't be able to read it. But
that's, I think, the best brand. Of course, there are probably others who would.
There's probably many, but this is the one that you prefer.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and I think.
So this has organic whole wheat flour, filtered water, sea salt, organic soy sauce, kombu, which is a kind of a seaweed. Yeah, and ginger, and that's it. That sounds really wholesome and good for you. No weird stuff in it. There's a seitan box. So this is what it comes in, and then you slice it up? Or?
You slice it up into medallions and then fry it. Flour it and then fry it.
Okay.
Along with some pre-fried onions and mushrooms. And then you add the marsala, and you've got a beautiful sauce.
Okay, and then you cook it off so that
you cook it off somewhat, but there's quite a bit of marsala involved. I think a cup and a half in this recipe, just for a small amount.
Oh my!
So it's quite delicious, actually. In my view, it's one of the greatest, one of the best tasting vegetarian dishes I've ever had.
It was delicious. I do have to say, I'd never tried something like this before, and it was fantastic. We really We really enjoyed it. In fact, so much so that I want to serve us some, and can we make the excuse and have some now on the show? Let's try some of your wonderful Seitan Marsala. I'll put this recipe up. You found this, you said, online somewhere,
I
yeah?
did.
Somebody's blog, was it?
Yes, if you want to put the recipe up, they recommend frying the seitan for 5 minutes. That, I think, will give you a very tough seitan. You have
Okay.
to realize that seitan is really cooked to begin with. So to keep it tender.
So it's not raw. It's
It's cooked.
It's cooked.
So to keep it tender, I would recommend just 30 seconds on each side.
So
And
that's
then-
pretty quick. I mean, as far as a dish goes, is this a
It
pretty
really is. It
easy
really-
dish to
yes,
prepare?
it is, and the results are kind of astonishing.
We're about to find out. I'm so excited. I'm hungry. We've been driving for an hour and a half in bad traffic. We just made it in time, so I'm really excited to have a snack. So let's try this wonderful dish you've made. Thank you so much
Oh,
for coming in today and sharing
thank
this
you for inviting
lovely
me.
recipe with us.
Mm.
Mmm.
Mm.
Mmm.
By
I'm
the
not
way,
just saying that. This is, and you can see there's like, you gotta chew.
the
I love
longer
this.
the stays after it's cooked, the
Mhm.
better. It seems to absorb all the flavor.
Oh,
and
this is
stuff.
so good. This is so good. I mean, I don't even miss the meat. You know, I have this thing where there's a lot of products that mimic meat and they try to look and act and feel like meat.
Yes,
And
yes.
this doesn't feel like that. It feels like its own thing.
Mhm. It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
And it's delicious. Do you feel seitan is more easily available nowadays than?
You can get it almost anywhere in Boston.
Yeah.
In health food stores, of
Mhm.
course. So it's
So it'd
very
be like
available.
a natural food section
Yes.
of a regular grocery or
Yeah. Mhm.
in the health
There
food
are other
store.
brands, but I recommend the Bridge. It's
The Bridge.
It's the closest
Let's show
to
you this
the
again. To wash me.
original Japanese formula.
There you can see the Bridge. Yeah, I really like that there aren't a whole bunch of ingredients. You know, strange things on there. And who knows, you know.
God,
This is so good.
it really is.
I have it all on my face. So how did you get into cooking?
Well, I guess being a bachelor for so long, what I used to do, I remembered all these delicious things that my mother cooked.
Oh.
My mother's a Neapolitan cook, a really great one.
Mm-hmm.
So I would call her up and ask her how to prepare it, and so I sort of learned that way over the course of years.
So over the phone with your mom.
Hmm.
Did you write down recipes or dish names or ideas?
No, I never did because I kind of knew what I knew what I wanted. I knew what the result would be, and I know it was all very intuitional. My approach, at
Yeah.
least. So
Well, that's probably why we get along so well.
I think
Because
so, yeah.
you know, after I started this show, I put down recipes, but I don't cook myself like
Oh,
that.
don't you? Oh no.
No, I
I'm
rarely
surprised.
use recipes. It's all from
Oh,
memory.
from memory. Yeah,
Yeah.
Me too.
I don't. So it takes a
Yeah.
lot of effort for me to
Mhm.
stop and measure things and then put them in. And there's something to be said about the taste memory that we carry from, you know, our family or
Oh,
our travels or
oh,
something,
that's
you
a
know,
very good-
strong experience that you've had
It's a very
somewhere.
good point. That's
you
a very
know?
good point, because the thing is, like, I'm sure this is true with Indian cooking or any kind of ethnic cooking. You know what result that you want, and you really have had to taste this stuff. It's very hard to work from a recipe
Yeah,
just
yeah.
out of a book because you don't know what you're aiming at. You don't know
That's
what.
right.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's supposed to be, and I
Right,
think
right.
over time, your own taste develops, and you might have a slight spin on it. And I know I don't
Oh,
often
sure.
know what I'm doing. Like I have made things that my mom's taught me, and then she'll come back and say, "I want to eat that thing that you made." And I said, "You taught this to me," but she'll say, "I don't know. Mine comes out different, and yours
Yeah,
comes out different."
yeah,
My
yeah.
grandmom's food always is amazing. And we get the recipe, and I try the same recipe, and and I know it doesn't taste quite the same. and there's nothing written down that you can point to and say that this is missing or this wasn't there or this was done too long or too
Yeah.
for too short a time. I don't know
Yeah.
what that. It's a touch, and they say that it's a touch. They say this has the Tony touch. I'm gonna try and make
Thank
this,
you.
but this has the Tony touch, and
Yeah.
it comes. I think it's just there's a lot of love in.
Well, I love to eat. That's for sure.
It's so good. What else did you make from your mom's recipe repertoire?
God, it's been so long. Well, there's some great vegetarian pasta dishes. For instance, there's a great one, and this might have some appeal to you, a cauliflower and pasta. It's cauliflower, garlic, and poured over pasta, a certain way of producing it, and then with a scoop of really good ricotta, but you have to get the real stuff.
And what is that?
Ricotta?
Yeah. Oh, ricotta.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
says it like an original Italian, not ricotta.
Yeah, it's ricotta.
Ricotta.
And of course, with pecorino cheese, which is not vegetarian, so you have to get the vegetarian. You have to get the vegetarian version, which there is.
So is it different? I mean, how is it for you as, having been brought up Italian, and I imagine being vegetarian or pescatarian was not what you were brought up.
Actually, it
eating,
is.
or was it? Oh,
it
that's
is, because
fascinating.
there's an enormous number of vegetarian dishes because my family in particular were very poor, and so you couldn't afford meat, and so they had to do with other things, mainly vegetables. So Italian vegetables are quite delicious there, because that's just how they had to do it,
And it's a pity we don't see them. I don't get the feeling that we see a lot of those dishes
You don't.
in typical restaurants that proclaim to be cooking Italian food. And I'm sure there may be some out there, and I'm really, if anybody knows of any, I'm all ears and I'm happy to go try. But generally, what we imagine Italian food to be is pasta or something baked with some kind of tomato sauce and cheese in some formation, or a couple of other things. I mean, I'm not to narrow it down, but there's a few standard variations. Just like Indian food, people say, "Oh, you must have grown up eating curry and naan all the time," and I didn't at all. I didn't.
Uh-huh.
And it may be similar. I mean, you're
there's
home
so many.
cooking.
There's so many dishes. I avoid tomato dishes, but they're not a huge portion of your everyday cuisine. Maybe
Right.
a couple times a week you'd have pasta with a red sauce, and mostly it's vegetables and fish. Lots of fish.
Lots of fish.
So. But it takes getting used to and understanding and so on.
Right. Where are some other places you've traveled to where you may have picked up the food or something?
Well, it's
the
hard to.
cuisine?
I've been all
You've
over
been
Asia.
so many places.
And a few places in Europe, but
Yeah.
mainly Asia. Philippines. The Philippines have got, by the way, they have a great cuisine. Also, I lived in Mexico, and they have a great cuisine. I know Indians are very much attracted to Mexican cuisine. I think there's certain similarities.
There are many, and oddly enough, though, I know in Bombay there aren't very many Mexican restaurants at all.
Yeah, that's.
And it was surprising. Maybe that's changed, but it always caught my attention that there weren't many, but there's so many similar. Cumin is common, cilantro or coriander leaf, as we call it.
Well, there's a guy who wrote a book about this, an Indian, who said that there was a tunnel from India to Mexico, and that accounts for the similarities between chapatis and tortillas and a number of other things. And he wrote it was quite a lengthy book, which I didn't really read, but just perused, and I thought it was really interesting, although I thought it was a crackpot theory.
This was some slightly nutty guy in the 70s, I think.
Yeah,
I remember this story.
Oh, you do that? Oh, did I mention
I
this
think
to
you had mentioned this, and
Oh, okay.
I did like the idea that there's similar breads, but then there's pita, which is we gotta have tunnels everywhere otherwise. But
But yeah.
That would be a fun tunnel from Mexico to India and back.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I don't know. And what else? We had asparagus at your place.
Oh, yeah.
That was really nice. You
Yes,
you
and
grilled them. No,
you
they were in the
baked them,
oven. They were in the
actually.
oven.
Baked
Yeah.
them.
They
Yeah.
were delicious.
Yeah.
That was really nice. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is how we did for dessert. Tony made, we had a cake which we got from a store, but then the cream. I mean, we had fresh whipped cream. Fresh, I mean, whipped on the table while we were there with this beautiful blender. I just love that blender. It was an old vintagey blender, kind of the same color as my dress. It was really nice. I was showcasing the blender. And that was really fun. And you sweetened it with maple syrup.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to tell me about that.
It's just the perfect thing because it's good flavor and it's liquid, so you don't have to worry about dissolving the sugar and so on.
Yeah.
So it's perfect for whipped cream.
Well, that's fantastic. I am so glad you could come on the show
I am
and
too.
share
It's been
your
fun.
dish.
I thought it would be difficult, but it wasn't. It was very easy.
You
to be
see,
here.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad. Tony was really nervous, but he did great. And I'm really grateful to have met you. And
And likewise.
this is why, I mean, talking to strangers has been one of the highlights of my existence. I always do it. And yeah, so you can find this episode and other recipes, stories, and more on www.kitchen-intuition.com. Tony, thank you so much for coming
Thank you.
and sharing your time. And we'll see you next time. Bye. You can say bye.
Bye.